The key announcement, and it was really recapping partly and expanding on what the Prime Minister said at lunchtime, ending working from home, that's immediate. Next Thursday, forget vaccine passes, though if individual institutions want to keep on using them, they so can do. From next Thursday too, no legal mandate for the wearing of masks, though I see that Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, saying they're still very useful and he'd like to see them carry on. We'll debate that, I'm sure, probably tomorrow. And from tomorrow too, no masks in schools. Just before we turn to Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, for some of those questions directed towards Sajid Javid, Health Secretary, about the politics of today and where he stands on things. Cases, I've been banging about this every day. Cases have been falling for 2 weeks of Omicron. For 2 weeks they've been falling. To give you a sense of that, the high point, probably the 29th of December, just before New Year's Eve, 225,000, now down to an average figure of 93,000. But as ever in all this, it's the hospitalisations that matter, down to 18,000 now. The number's falling, but only 703 people are mechanically ventilated, which is a much, much smaller number compared to the dark days of this time last year, when it was Delta, or at least at the very least, when we had fewer antivirals to treat people, and Omicron also producing weaker effects, more transmissible, less lethal, seems to be the gist of it. Just on the politics, and we'll turn to Darren with this thought. He said, Sajid Javid said, I couldn't be at a close friend's funeral. It's not been easy, he said, but he fully supports the Prime Minister. We are waiting for the result of Sue Gray's report, he said. Darren, he was asked a very direct question about whether he would throw his hat in the ring. Obviously, you know, he's an old stager, Sajid Javid wouldn't be drawn on that. But not for the first time, senior politicians, including members of the Cabinet, are saying, just wait for Sue Gray's report. But then there's the ... They're not saying what they'll do then.
Yeah, indeed, and I think it was interesting that Sajid Javid essentially had a script which he stuck to pretty much throughout. That is that the Prime Minister's apologised, he's got his full support, that they are waiting for Sue Gray's report. The Prime Minister will go to the Commons, say what he's got to say, and as you said then, ... obviously wholly dependent on what Sue Gray concludes or sets out in that report. There were kind of moments, though, where you got a sense a little bit where he wants to make clear that he was pretty frustrated and he understood the anger around these parties that had taken place in Downing Street. You say he touched on some of the personal situations that he faced, not least of all that his mother lives alone and that he couldn't see her very often. And I think to a degree just kind of making that little space when he was also asked, of course, whether he had broken any rules, making clear that he had not. But on the whole, pretty supportive, sticking to a script essentially, very determined that there are going to be no headlines from this press conference apart from those around the changes to Plan B. Just in terms of where we are with that, and there is politics of course around that, because we only are where we are in terms of Plan B because, and we must not forget this, that they got through the Commons only with the help of the Labour Party. There's that massive rebellion before Christmas, particularly when it came to vaccine passports. But the government pretty determined. They think they have now really turned a corner when it comes to Omicron. Though it must be said, and you were talking about cases there, they have gone up for the last 3 days in the UK. 108,000, I think, cases today. 7-day average is definitely down, but creeping up a little bit. I don't think there's any cause for concern. ONS figures still stating they're down, but they seem to be creeping up for some reason. But you have to take these things, of course, on the 7-day averages. But the big message overall here is essentially that there is a path. And I think that's what the Health Secretary wants to get at. You heard it there about living with COVID time and time again. These restrictions being eased. We're expecting a further announcement when it comes to travel next week. But then the big milestone will be in March with a proper review about no restrictions at all, essentially. How do we live with COVID without restrictions? And that is where the Health Secretary really wanted to emphasise today that we are on a different road, he thinks, and the scientists seem to agree at the moment, out of this pandemic.
Darren, thanks very much indeed. Darren McCaffrey there, who's had a very busy day in Westminster.